Welcome to the Brigham Young University Family History Library webinar series. Feel free to use the chat box for any questions during the presentation. If we are unable to answer them during the presentation, they will be answered at the end. My name is Braden Knutson. I will be your host for this webinar. Today we will be pleased to hear from Jean Naisbitt, who will be giving a presentation titled Inherited Family Records, Now What? Jean graduated from BYU with degrees in genealogy and library science. She was the Stake Family History Director for 10 years before serving 5 missions with her husband, including twice to Family History Worldwide Support. She is a mother of 7 and a grandmother of 27. Her hobbies are people and genealogy.
I'm excited to be here today to talk about inherited family records. Now what? And I started into family history work when I was 16, 17 in high school, when I still had one set of grandparents alive and all of my aunt and uncles, which was a good time to get started. And although I did not ask them all questions that I have now, I was grateful that I had started at a young age. So let's learn how to sort, dejunk, identify the treasures, and save the family jewels that have been passed on down to you. So you can receive piles of journals, histories, photos, research papers, and who knows what will come into your possession. The bottom picture is with a green bin and 2 cardboard boxes came into my possession in the last 6 months. Do you feel overwhelmed? Of course you do. That's a lot to sort through and decide what you want to keep or what can be tossed. And once it's been sorted, what do you do with it? The best thing is to use technology to free up space, and that makes it easier to share with family members. Family records, they're not expensive mementos, and thus they're not thought of as treasures. The family historian considered them priceless, but will you? The hardest thing for a family historian to do is what? Throw anything away. We want to keep it. We go through the actions of sorting, but we end up keeping it, right? I'll sort, but not toss. I need to keep all the important stuff. My beloved Aunt Blanche was our family historian, and when I had my first baby shower over 40 years ago, she gave me this book of remembrance full of family histories, pedigree charts, and family group sheets. I call it my starter kit. I still refer to it often because it is one of my family's jewels. Well, when she moved into her daughter's home, I inherited this box from her, and it was mostly research notes, correspondence. I took a couple of folders out for research. I've added stuff to it, and then I stored it in a safe place for 30 years and never looked at it again until long after she had died. William G. Hartley, a historian and an author, said, "Moving time often triggers fatal decisions regarding records. At such moments, old items, particularly if disorganized, seem like junk. The impulse to discard is especially strong for people moving into smaller quarters with limited storage space. Death, particularly when unexpected, severely strains survivors who must make hurried and emotional decisions about what the deceased belongings, and sometimes families just grow weary of saving old items. I have found that to be true. When I go to a museum, I'll see things that were in my house when I was a young girl and think, I had that. I wonder what happened to them, like my roller skates with those old roller skates with keys that my generation would be familiar with. I want to give an example. True story. One of my daughters had a neighbor, and she had done family history work for centuries, well, decades. 3 years after her death, her husband passed away. None of their children were interested in the family records. The children sorted through their parents' things. Records were to be tossed. A neighbor saw the unwanted records sitting out by the garbage can. This is a picture of the actual records. So she recognized these as being possible jewels, and she asked the family if she could have them. The family, they were thrilled to get rid of what they thought was junk. Then that neighbor called my daughter, who at that time was teaching a family history class. My daughter and her husband went and picked up the records, brought them to my house. My son, who works for the family history library, came over, and we started going through these boxes to see what we'd want to keep and what would not be of value. My daughter went right to the Book of Remembrance. She found the marriage certificate of this woman. She found a lock of hair of a daughter who had died as a little girl. She found a picture of the woman when she was little and the family dog. That white thing in the middle is the dog. And of course, a photo album. They were stuck in the pages of this Book of Remembrance. Included was the woman's personal records, the woman's health records from birth, her operations, her illnesses, her diseases, any accidents she had had, family histories of her ancestors, and then she had her own personal history record, her first date, how she met her husband, hopes for her children. We had her family's jewels. This was a woman who I had never met. She had worked decades of hard work in order to accumulate these records for her children, and it touched my heart. Here she had made meticulous efforts so that her descendants would know not only that she lived, but how she had lived. Her passion and her life's work was cast aside as if junk. It made me ponder my own family. Where are the family jewels? Attics, boxes, garages, basements, or in piles of old junk in relatives' homes? So you've been given a box, what to keep or what to toss. I have these 3 simple tips: sort, store, and share. Sorting is, I think, the hardest part, and it will take time. You want to get things done fast, but it will take time. You want to be careful. You want to make sure that you can find the jewels among other things. But if it's unorganized or unsorted, it only adds clutter and confusion. And when you sort, do not forget to have a garbage can handy. Let family members help you sort. Okay, that would be scary. It was scary just taking this picture, to have little kids take your family records. You want to have adults. You don't want a large group, maybe a couple. You don't want people that are hoarders because they will not throw anything away. You want family lovers who want to keep histories, who want to keep important things, but not everything. I have thought many times as I've sorted through things, oh, this might be a clue. I might need this later. Why would it be written down if it wasn't valuable, right? Better keep a paper copy just in case the computer crashes. What if a natural disaster destroys my sister's records? One day, my kids and grandkids are going to want this after I'm gone. And so we have it in our heads that we need to keep it all, but actually, that's false. We don't need to keep everything. And so it can be a little bit discouraging. We don't want you to be discouraged because help is here. I have simple guidelines for sorting inherited boxes. This is cool. You found a jewel. If can't decide, set it aside. Don't rehash, throw in trash. So let's look at this first one. This is cool. You found a jewel. That would be any kind of vital record: birth, marriage, death records, church, census records, journals, obituaries, letters, labeled photos, wills, school records, bibliographies, histories of the town, copies of land records, etc. These are all primary sources you'd want to use because that shows that your ancestors did live and basically what they did. Pictures are obviously jewels. You don't want to throw away pictures. And, baby records, ancestors' histories, family data, those are all things that you would want to keep. Letters to, this is my grandmother's letter to her son, which is my father. Labeled photos. That's me. Can you see my mom and my sister? That's a fun picture to show because it showed not only that my mother could sew, but she wanted us to stand out as a family and be connected. Now here's an old picture of the Burton Haven ward. It's unlabeled, but on the back it said that in this picture somewhere are is my great grandmother and her son and his wife. And I haven't found them because I did not know them. They were all gone when I was born. But as searching through this picture, I found my grandfather, who was bishop of that ward. And I would recognize his eyes anywhere. So, that's still valuable to me, even though it is unlabeled. Let's look at if can't decide, let's set it aside. You've got research notes. my aunt in my Aunt Blanche's box, she had research notes, and some of them, it was interesting to watch how she'd come to certain conclusions. Some conclusions were not accurate, as we have the records available to us now over the internet or at a family history library. So that would be of interest. If I wanted to keep one or two, I don't think I'd want to keep every research note. This is a booklet of ancestors. Only one page of that booklet is directly related to me. I don't know if I'd want to keep the whole booklet. It's something I want to set aside and give to somebody else. And then a history of where some of them live. Do I want to keep that? Would I want to donate it? So if I'm having trouble deciding, I want to set it aside. Other things too, like calendars that you kept through the years of all your activities. I came across some when my 7 children were still all at home, and I couldn't believe I had the energy to do everything, take them to the lessons and to programs and to school activities. It wears me out even thinking about it. Some of these things you might want to keep, and if you can't decide, then set it aside. My father-in-law, this is one of those, he kept this. It was from 1934 when he was a missionary. And this is volume 2, N to Z. And what it was full of as a missionary is apparently they must have been given little pamphlets of thoughts and quotes. And so he kept these 2 volumes of them. And before they had the computer, this was excellent for having references to give them ideas for talks and other things. So we have kept that. This book I found in buying a big green bin that I have pictures of that you'll see of my family photos. I don't know who this Alvin Nichols is. He was Utah Pioneers. I have no clue. I've gone through the pages quickly. I cannot find any direct relation. I would not want to throw this away. This is something that I would want to set aside for the future. I came across a bunch of unlabeled photos. I had no clue what they were, although it looked like Utah to me, and I was confused why somebody would save these until I came across this picture of my dad sitting there with his furry hat on. He wore that hat all the time, even in the summer. And I love this picture. He's got his jeans rolled up and he's just resting. It looks like that could be a boat launch. I don't know. But then the pictures made more sense to me. My dad loved the mountains. Okay, don't rehash, throw in trash. Blank pages. Every box I've sorted through, I have found tons of blank pages. If you want to save them for your grandkids and let them color on things, if not, throw them away. Duplicates. I had an aunt at our reunion, she'd bring out these papers and she had paid a fortune to have these duplicates made. So in my head, it's, oh, I've got to have one for each of the children. Well, I better take one for my siblings. And so over the years, I had collected several of them. Keep one, but I don't need them all now that if you digitize them, they can access them through the computer. Here is the old family history card catalog. That's outdated. Why would I want to keep that? No, those are things you can throw away. Old lesson manuals, research guidelines no longer used. A lot of things, why do we need to keep them? We don't need to keep things just for sentimental reasons. For instance, you can find the U.S. Social Security and Death Index now and the old ancestral file. They're on FamilySearch.org. I have come across dozens of old data forms no longer used. I don't need to save those. Suggestions for writing a personal history or other things, tons can be found on the internet now. I also have come across these old floppy disks, and this really surprised me. Brand new, never been used. I thought, wow, that would have been great if I'd known I'd had it, but I don't have a computer that can read any of these. So why would I save it? Or old forms that you've worked on and then have submitted to Family Search. You don't need that if it's already uploaded. Okay, so you've made the sorting process. You've passed that, which is good. That's the hardest part. Where are you going to store what you keep? You'll need binders, notebooks, folders, even boxes, but put the boxes in dry places. We had Christmas boxes that we put underneath our kitchen sink and bathroom. You know what happened? We lost some of our Christmas decorations. So if you're going to use boxes, put it in a dry place. But keep in mind that the plastic will resist water and rodents. I have had records where the mice have found them, and that's not pleasant. They have color folders now. If you wanted to color organize your ancestors, you can do that as well. You want to have it in an organized fashion as you sort it. Organize them by surname and use the woman's maiden name. That'll be easiest as you go back through the different generations. I use the exception though of my parents and grandparents. And why? Because you think of them as mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, and that's what I have more of are my parents and my grandparents rather than great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents. So keep them together. You can also make copies. That's my father and mother and his parents off to the right. I could put a copy of his information with my mom and dad, and if I wanted to, also could add it to his parents' page as well. When you come across information like a letter from my mom, I would put it in what I already have organized in the binder that already has her information in it. Then it's easy for me to find and go back to. Bins are perfect for I can't decide, set it aside for later. Use it for both paper and photo. This bin came into my possession last month. My sister had had it for 40 years, and before that, my mother had stored the information in there, pictures and photos, in a trunk in our basement. Perfect place to store things if you can't decide. The same with pictures. That green bin, I took out these pictures. I have envelopes for different families. I like the envelopes because it keeps them more intact than just a plain folder. So here, anyone that is a South, I put all South relatives in that envelope and Taylor's in the other envelope. We've gone through, my sister and I, we've sorted, we've put families according to their surname. Be easy to locate until we decide whether we want to donate them to, say, someplace like the church history library, etc. You can also sort your pictures by events. Now, this is a photo album that my father-in-law kept as a missionary. And the fun thing about it is there's my father-in-law as a missionary, and there's my dad. They served in the same mission. And my father-in-law went through when he realized who my dad was, and he made copies of pictures. Any picture that had my father in it, he made a copy of it. And I came across those pictures last month, and I thought, wow, I didn't know Dad. See, my brain, I'm getting older. I forgot about that. I didn't know Dad had any pictures of his mission, and my father-in-law had been so thoughtful that he did that. And here's a picture that they're both in, my father-in-law on the right and my dad on the left, as missionaries. Another thing you're going to find are unidentified pictures. These pictures of these children, on the back they have their names, and they are all Taylors. I do not know who they are. They're not a direct relative. They are somebody, but I don't know who they are yet. And I want to keep them with the Taylors because then I know that they are Taylors rather than somebody that's really unidentifiable. And save that for a later time. Maybe I'll never discover who these people are. Maybe I will go ahead and donate them to the church historian's office. But until then, I keep them where they're safe and organized. When in doubt, don't throw out. Keep it in that can't decide bin. Later, it might fill a piece of your family puzzle. Here's an example. A U.S. naturalization application. Remember the starter kit that my aunt gave me? Well, in Family Search, I had come across someone had changed the name of my great-grandfather, second great-grandfather, and in this naturalization paper that I'd had in my house for years, I came across this and it said, my proper name is John Rich. In Family Search, someone had changed it to, I think it was John Wilhelm Rich. I didn't think that was right, so I went back to my starter kit, wanted to see what my aunt had on it, found this proof that his proper name was John Rich. I was able to make corrections to Family Search, giving documentation so that they would have evidence of his true and accurate name. This record also has some interesting information. It said that he sailed from the port of Liverpool on the 12th of September, 1829, and he landed in New York. So puzzle pieces. He left from Liverpool, September 1829, and landed in New York City. There were several ports that people would sail from, and they also could land in other places other than Salt Lake City. So this is Salt Lake City. No one lands a ship in Salt Lake City. New York City. So here we have proof that we can use from a record that has been Didn't know what to do with it, held on to it for 40, 30 years, and then answered questions. With your records, a good thing to do with them is to digitize them, including your pictures, and get documents, even journals, on the computer. That way you can share them, and that way they are preserved. Scan items with to make them digital, like flatbed. If you have a real old document, you want to scan it on a flatbed scanner. You don't want to send it through a printer because it might not make it all the way through. Scanning keeps the documents pure and clean. There's no typing, spelling, or writing errors. I am dyslexic, and even in putting this presentation together, I had transversed two numbers making 100 years difference in the time frame, so this keeps my records clean. Photos are excellent when they're scanned because you can enlarge them to see details, and it prevents them from fading. Here's a picture that I found in the church historian's office. These are granddaughters and relatives of John Taylor. This woman was listed as an unidentified woman, but I recognized her as my Aunt Valois. And so I pointed that out to them there, and they suggested I just pencil in and we'll put her name in there. And I didn't, being a historian, I didn't think that they should just take a stranger's word that that is my Aunt Valois. So I called her daughter, who worked across the street. She went over with some identification and said, "This is my mother, this is her name," and now she's identified in that photo. But the thing that I was really interested in was her. She was my grandmother's Aunt Mary, and she was wearing a brooch. And I enlarged it. It's fuzzy, you know, it isn't really clear, but I wanted to look at that brooch because her mother, my second great grandmother, I had remembered she had a picture wearing a brooch, and I wanted to see if it was the same. By enlarging it, I could see that they were not the same brooch, but it was fun to still enlarge the picture and make the comparison. Now here's a picture that had come into my possession, and this is my mother sitting on, they used to take pictures of little kids on, it looks like a donkey or a horse. Behind her on the left are her two older sisters, and that's her nephew next to her. And this is her oldest brother, half brother. My grandfather had been married before. I couldn't figure out what he was holding, so I enlarged it even more, and that is my Uncle William. When you can see that that's a baby now, but at the time I had no clue. I was able to enlarge, and there's a picture of a baby. Digitizing pictures is really fun and exciting. Okay, so how would you organize your files on your computer? I always do it by surname. In my documents file, there's my ancestors' histories. These are names of my ancestors. I'm going to open up the Taylor file. It's probably more organized than the others. Agnes Taylor Taylor. I want to see, she was a Taylor, she married a Taylor, and we have not found any connection yet. But I'm going to open up her file. I've written a history on her. And here's the information. I put anything I find on her in her file. So then I have reference to it, or I want to see where that came from, or I find new information, I can just go right directly to her file and put it there. And I can also, you know, you can separate it, but you can have it go as deep as you want it to go, keeping things organized. Same with photos. Here's the ancestors pictures. I put them all in one. I even have it for family photos unlabeled, which, you know, you will find unlabeled photos. I wanted to do the same thing. I'm going to open up the Taylor file. And I want to look at William Whitaker Taylor, my great-grandfather. Open up his file, and here I've put his children, his wife, one of his granddaughters, his sister. You know, I can make it go deeper if I want. This is him. I only have two pictures of him. He died as a young man. My grandmother was 2 when he passed away. So if I want to add a picture to a history that I'm writing or retyping, I can pull it up. Here's, I want to add this picture, that picture, organized. You know, this is not rocket science. It's just keep it simple. Keep your system simple. And always, always, always back up your work. Tech support, I like to report a farmer in the Dell. You know, working with computers can be frustrating because accidents happen, like accidentally deleting your work or your computer crashes. I have had that happen, both of those to me. And when our computer crashed, thankfully we had it backed up with a company and they were able to restore everything. But look at this. I hope you had that backed up. When you think about the thousands of years before us, people did not have the opportunity to back up their work. And once broken, it was gone and you'd have to redo it. But now, with just a stroke of your finger, you can back up your work and preserve what it is you've done. So for a desktop computer, these are different ways you can back it up, which are good. A laptop won't have as much as your desktop, but you can still back up the files that you feel are the most important. Your tablets and iPads, your smartphones, those are great. With a laptop too, you can take them with you when you go places, take pictures, you can show your relatives things. I think it's a great place for storing certain things, not as much as on your desktop computer. But with your smartphones, I was talking to a cousin one day and was telling her that on Family Search I found a picture of our grandmother as a baby. She doesn't do church stuff, but she was interested in seeing the picture of grandmother. So I pulled it out on my smartphone, pulled up the picture of grandma. She was excited. She went in and joined up with Family Search. Okay, external hard drives, they can travel with you. You can take a jump drive, put one per surname, or just put all your family history on one jump drive or whatever. You can take that to your relatives' homes and you can download what you have or you can upload what they have. It's portable and it's nice, but really, for really storing things, terabytes are great. It used to be that they were huge, like a suitcase, your portable hard drives, but now look how small they are. I have one attached to my laptop and one attached to my desktop where I can store and back up, especially family photos and family histories. Cloud storage. This is a great place too because if something happens, whether it's a natural disaster or say your computer crashes, your work is there. Also, when I travel, I can put stuff in the cloud and I can access it when I get back home. It's still there on my desktop. Family Search and Family Tree are my favorite places for storing family history photos and histories. They have a section that's called Memories, and that's where you put your histories and your photos. You'd go into Family Tree. There's different places. It doesn't matter which one you click on. It takes you into your family tree. This is a fan chart view. This is my second great-grandmother. I click on her. It shows that she has 11 memories, which are usually your pictures and stories. Pulled it up. Here's a picture I had never seen before of her. I loved it. She just looks really distinguished. But this was a little bit different because those are her parents. She had the same name as her mother. And this Agnes Taylor, she married and divorced 4 times. And that was in the era of polygamy. And we like to say it was sequential polygamy. And when she died, by the time she was this age, the age of her parents, she was not married to anybody. So that is not her and needs to be changed and corrected. Here's another grandmother. This is my own grandmother. She had 19 memories. Pulled her up. This is where I found her as a little baby, but it's not showing. You can add your documents and like her birth certificate or death certificate. Then you have proof of different things you don't have to go searching all over for. And here are her stories. And I've pulled out one of those stories and retyped it, adding pictures for interest. You can add audio as well. You cannot yet add video, but you can add audio. So a story that I would want to add for her, which I need to do, they used to come stay with us when my parents would win trips and they would go places like Hawaii or wherever, and they would stay with us. Well, one of those times, my older sister was in the bedroom. She called Grandma into her room and said, "Grandma, I'm so sick. Look, I threw up on the floor." And my grandmother said, "Well, clean it up." And so my sister picked up the plastic vomit and threw it at my grandma. And the next thing we saw was Grandma chasing my sister around the house in the yard with a broom. And she had to be in her early 70s at the time. She was a feisty little thing. But yeah, now that's a fun story you can add. And they can hear the voice and then they can get the story. There are tons of free cloud storage sites out there. You do a Google search and you will come up with tons of them. Dropbox is my favorite. You get 2 free gigabytes of storage, but you can upgrade a little bit to 16 or pay money and get a lot more. Google Drive is also good. 15 gigs of free storage. Box gives you 10 gigabytes, and Mega, you can have up to 50 gigabytes. You can put, say, I'm going to put all my pictures out here in Google Drive. I'm going to put all my histories in Dropbox. You can do whatever you want, but it's in the cloud, then you can share and access and people can participate. Records on computers, instead of old boxes, will be seen as jewels instead of junk. And that is so true. When we pass our records on down to the next generation, they're going to go for the things on the computers because they were born computer literate. Let them, the rising generation, help put the records on the computer or into the cloud. It will lighten your load and it will also pique their interest. Let them retype old histories that are faded, handwritten, or on the long sheets for family books of remembrances. The one in the middle is the old mimeograph copies that was really hard to see. Just retype it. And some students nowadays are not even being taught how to read cursive. It's easier for them to read, and the long sheets do not fit in standard binders. Okay, so you've sorted, you've stored it, and now you should share it. Technology makes it easier and cheaper to share information with family members worldwide. Why should you share? Well, records will never be completely destroyed, lost, or accidentally thrown out. Family members will have their own records, and your life work and records will be preserved. Your children might not be interested in family history, but that does not mean that all relatives feel that way. This is one of my daughters. She swears that that's the way she feels about it, but she loves indexing, and she's taught her children to index, and I have not told her that's family history work. So if your children aren't interested, find a niece or a nephew or a cousin, and if they show an interest, share your records with them. Shared histories and photos generate fast interest faster than charts of names. So I have these, some of my children posed for this picture, and I want you to know that when I was done taking pictures of them, they were still looking at the photos and going over the information. That was far more interesting than just sitting down and trying to figure out what's going on. My mother passed away when I was 14. My sister, there to the right, took her journals, typed them up, made copies. This is before home computers, and sent out copies to all of her siblings, my siblings, and even to my dad, who wasn't thrilled to see his courtship, passed out to all the family members because there were different stories in there. When he was dating my mom, for instance, he he was an electrical engineer, but he became one. But when he was dating my mom, the radio at her home only worked when he was there for some reason, so they'd always have to call him to have him back and get the radio working. Until one day, he accidentally dropped one of the tubes from the radio in the snow, and they found it, and then they knew that he was taking a tube home with him, so they'd call him up again and have him come back. Well, he wasn't thrilled to have that out, but it makes it fun for us and serves him right, right? Okay, I want to give you some examples of why it's important to share. These are pictures of my uh, wonderfully organized records, which it does always look better in a picture. I had a nephew call me about 20 years ago, and he wanted all the copies of all my genealogical data for his college class, and that was before the internet. But really, that would have been too much to send him. It would have cost me a fortune, and it would have overwhelmed him. He only needed a portion. When we were on our way to visit our daughter overseas. We stopped at a niece's house. Because I was going to visit my daughter, I had stories and pictures on a jump drive and my old PATH program, and I downloaded them to my niece's computer. And then I started telling her family stories as I showed her what I had downloaded. She had never heard any of these stories before, and she started asking me questions. It was amazing. I thought everybody knew these stories. She did not know any of them. So if you don't share, who will? I sent one of my cousins a timeline of our third great grandmother, detailing her life in pictures, how she started in England, went to Canada, and then walked over to Utah, died in Salt Lake City. He emailed back 2 pages of questions. 2 pages. He knew nothing about her, and he really wanted to know more, and he was a history major. We have stayed in close contact with him, and we share back and forth now family information. One of our reunions, we visited family graves, and my oldest sister started telling ancestor stories. This is not that reunion. This is just some of us meeting in a cemetery. But at that reunion, she started telling stories, and sadly, her facts were wrong. And I sweetly had to correct her because there was a whole generation there hearing these stories for the first time ever. And when I finished, her orthodontist son asked where he could read more stories. Now, I mentioned that he's an orthodontist, not that it matters, but I wanted you to know that he was an educated man. He was not a young boy. He was a man who was very interested in family history, and he still is. I send him stuff all the time, and he's grateful for it. So today, when I get these questions from my nieces and nephews, which is interesting because from every one of my siblings, I have had one of their children or two ask me family history questions, but I refer them to Family Search, Family Tree, Memories. And also when I retype interviews that I've had of my aunts and uncles when they were alive, or histories that I've had in that starter kit, or I go through and I scan ancestors' photos from that bin that I had just barely received, I email them to all the relatives, and I have been amazed and thrilled at responses. Things like, "Thank you so much. Oh, where can I read more? You're just the best." It has surprised me because everyone thinks that no one likes family history, and I've been proven wrong. Remember my Aunt Blanche and my starter kit and the box that she gave me? 6 years before she died, she showed me treasures I had never seen. A dresser in her room in her daughter's home had one drawer for each of her siblings, filled with letters, histories, little mementos, etc. In my mother's drawer was an original letter from a third great-grandfather, a happier sequel to the copy I had. The copy I have is the father is so upset that my great-grandfather would leave his family to join some strange religious group and go to Utah when really you can worship God anywhere. And he was just distraught. The letter in my aunt's drawer, he was, how are the children? How are you doing? I love your letters. It was just such a difference from the copy I had. I was a young stay-at-home mom. I had no money. I had no camera, no cell phone, and a car full of little kids. I told my aunt, I'm going to come back and we're going to go to a copy center and we're going to get copies. And I never returned. After she died, I asked her children about the records in the dresser drawer. Surprisingly, none of them knew anything about it until 17 years later when I heard the rest of the story. I asked one of her grown granddaughters, what happened to the records your grandma kept in her dresser? She replied, you never heard what happened to those records? Grandma was upset her children were not interested, so she tore the records up in front of them and threw them away. I was devastated. I could not believe that. So I rushed home, found Aunt Blanche's box, hoping she had made copies of her treasures. I actually found things to throw away, but I still had lots of room. So then I pulled out the box of my dad's things, filled up that box, my plastic box, more secure, of course, than the old cardboard box, filled up the trash can. Goodbye, Aunt Blanche's box. Aunt Blanche did not give me any copies of those jewels in her dresser. They are gone forever. But I did find jewels in my dad's box. Family photos of ancestors. Jewels. I found a letter that my aunt had written about my mother's last days before she passed away. Here's a picture of my mother and her roommate. The arrow is pointing to the roommate. I am named after her roommate. Never met the woman. Here's a card that I made for my mother for her birthday. And like my little granddaughters, I love princesses too. Here's a handwritten letter of my grandmother. These are all jewels. And now they are organized and stored. Easier to identify, access, and digitize, making it much easier to share. Today's technology protects treasured records from getting lost. So we need to remember to sort, store, and share. And you can see now those are just, most of them are just our parents, my family, my siblings, and a couple of cousins. It's amazing how it multiplies. And it would be very expensive, if not digitized, to share with that many people. Keep in mind, this is cool. You found a jewel. If you can't decide, set it aside. Don't rehash, throw in trash. Remember the woman whose children did not want her records. I went on a family search and I found a common ancestor looking through her records. Okay, there's somebody, say his name was Abraham, and I looked at his family's information and I found 3 emails of people who had submitted stuff for this man. I wrote an email and sent it to 3. I wrote, "You do not know me, but I have family records of, a neighbor saved them from being thrown out with the trash. Do you want them?" I received a reply the very next day. This woman, and she does not live in Utah, wrote, "Hello, she was my cousin, and we are most interested in those records and appreciate greatly that you have saved them. We talked to our nephew, and he would be glad to pick them up until we can get them." The nephew turned out, I had put my this is where I live, this is my address. It turned out the nephew was like 2 miles from my house. We know the importance of those records and we want them preserved. We appreciate greatly what you have done to preserve them. Obviously, not everyone understands the value of them and the hours and the money it took to collect them. Thank you, and we would like to keep in touch. Her nephew came. Those are the actual records, picked them up, carried them off, and I love happy endings. So, it's really important that you remember there are going to be no record inspectors coming to your home to inspect your organizational skills. It's just not going to happen. It's not rocket science. You don't have to have a system that's so complicated nobody can figure it out, but you do want to have your records organized. Just don't forget, sort, store, and share. It's not easy and it will take a lot of time, but it'll be worth it. Why? Now, these are some of our grandchildren, and the reason that we want to do this is because the rising generation one day will inherit your life's work and your organized treasured jewels if they haven't already received most of them in the first place. You don't want to disappoint them. I appreciate being here today and sharing this with you, and that's basically the end. For further information, you can go to this website down at the bottom and you can have it replayed. Thank you very much.